The starship Horizon drifted silently through the void, its engines humming with quiet power as it approached the uncharted planet. Through the main viewport, Captain Olivia Wright studied the swirling storms that covered most of the planet's surface. GX-427 looked hostile and uninviting, with violent purple clouds and occasional flashes of lightning that could be seen even from orbit. "Anything interesting on the scans, Alan?" Olivia asked, turning to her science officer, Alan Martinez, hunched over his console, his brow furrowed in concentration. The blue light from the screen reflected off his glasses as his fingers danced across the controls. "Yes, Captain. Very interesting, actually." Alan straightened up and pointed to a series of energy readings on his screen. "These energy patterns don't match anything in our database. They're coming from a deep canyon system near the equator, in one of the few areas not affected by the storms." Olivia moved closer to examine the readings. After 15 years of exploration missions, she had learned to trust her curiosity. "Could be natural geological activity." "Could be." Alan nodded. "But these patterns show too much regularity. They almost look designed." That was enough for Olivia. The Horizon had been sent to this remote sector specifically to find signs of new life or technology. After 3 months of empty planets and lifeless moons, GX-427 was their first promising lead. "Prepare a shuttle," she ordered. "I want a small team on the surface within the hour." 90 minutes later, Security Chief Paul Carter guided the small exploration shuttle through the turbulent atmosphere of GX-427. Beside him, xenobiologist Samantha Kelly checked her equipment one last time. In the rear seats, Alan reviewed the sensor data while Olivia made final notes in the mission log. "The canyon should be visible in about 30 seconds, Paul said, his strong hands steady on the controls despite the shuttle's violent shaking. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, and a barren landscape spread out beneath them. The surface was a dull reddish-brown, broken by deep cracks and crevices. And there, cutting across the plain like a wound, was the massive canyon system. "It's beautiful," Samantha whispered as Paul brought the shuttle down for a landing on a flat area near the canyon's edge. The team donned their environmental suits. The planet's atmosphere contained too much chlorine for humans to breathe, and the temperature hovered around 15 degrees below freezing. One by one, they stepped out of the shuttle onto the alien surface. "The energy readings are coming from about half a kilometer that way," Alan said, pointing toward a narrow path that led down into the canyon. They moved carefully along the path, their boots crunching on the brittle surface. The deeper they went into the canyon, the more the walls around them changed. What had looked like ordinary rock from a distance now revealed itself to be shot through with strange crystalline formations. The crystals gave off a faint bluish glow that grew stronger as they descended. "I've never seen anything like this," Samantha said, running her scanner over one of the crystal clusters. "The molecular structure is unlike any crystal formation I've studied." "Are they safe?" Paul asked, his hand resting cautiously on his sidearm. "They appear to be inert," Samantha replied. "But these readings suggest they might have some sort of network connecting them." After another 20 minutes of descent, the narrow path opened into a large cavern. The team stopped in stunned silence. The entire chamber was lined with the crystal formations, but here they were larger and more complex, forming structures that resembled delicate towers and arches. The blue light pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. "It's like a city," Olivia breathed, her voice filled with wonder. Alan's scanner beeped urgently. "The energy readings are off the scale in here. Whatever we detected from orbit, this is the source." Samantha approached one of the crystal towers, her scientific curiosity overcoming her caution. She reached into her pack for a collection tool. "I'm going to take a small sample." As soon as her tool touched the crystal surface, the steady, blue glow flashed bright red. A high-pitched tone filled the chamber, vibrating through their suits. The crystal Samantha had touched began to melt the metal of her collection tool like it was made of wax. "Back away," Olivia ordered. "Everyone out now." But it was too late. The vibration had shaken loose some rocks from the cavern ceiling. A small avalanche of stones came crashing down, blocking part of the entrance path. "Is everyone okay?" Olivia called out, counting her team members through the cloud of dust. 3 acknowledgments came back. They were shaken but unharmed. As the dust settled, Samantha noticed something moving among the fallen rocks. "There's something there," she said, pointing to a small area where the rocks had partially collapsed. Paul moved forward cautiously, his light illuminating the space. Something was trapped under the fallen debris, something that glittered and shifted in the beam of his light. "It looks like..." "A chunk of the crystal broke off," Paul said. But as they watched, the crystal mass moved again, clearly trying to free itself. "That's no broken chunk," Alan whispered. "It's alive." The creature was small, about the size of a house cat, with a body that seemed to be made entirely of the same crystalline material that lined the caves. Its surface constantly shifted between different geometric patterns, and small pulses of blue light moved across it. "It's trapped," Samantha said, already moving closer. Paul grabbed her arm. "Protocol says we observe only. We don't interfere with unknown life forms." Samantha pulled away. "It's in pain. Look at the color change." The creature's blue glow had dimmed to a pale, sickly color. It made no sound, but its movements were becoming weaker. "I'm helping it," Samantha decided. And before anyone could stop her, she began carefully moving the smaller rocks away from the trapped creature. "Sam, be careful," Olivia warned, but she didn't order her to stop. Something about the small being's struggle touched even the captain's usually cautious heart. The final rock was heavier than the others. Paul sighed and stepped forward to help, and together they lifted it away from the creature. Free at last, the crystalline being didn't flee as they expected. It rose up slightly, its form reshaping itself from a flattened mass back into something more complex. A rounded body with several small protrusions that might have been limbs. Its color shifted back to a healthier blue. "Incredible," Alan murmured, scanning the creature. "It seems to be able to rearrange its molecular structure at will." The creature turned what appeared to be a front end toward Samantha. A small tendril of crystal extended toward her, stopping just short of touching her suit. "I think it's thanking me," Samantha said softly. The team watched in fascination as the creature began to move around the cavern floor, stopping occasionally as if to study them. When they finally turned to leave, carefully navigating around the rockfall, they were surprised to find the crystal being following them. "I think it wants to come with us," Samantha said with a smile in her voice. Paul shook his head. "Absolutely not. We have no idea what that thing is or what it can do." But the creature continued to follow them all the way back to the shuttle, moving with surprising speed and grace for something that appeared to be made of solid crystal. At the shuttle door, Olivia made her decision. "If it wants to come, we take it. Contained and under observation, of course." She held up a hand to stop Paul's objection. "This is exactly the kind of discovery we were sent to make." As the shuttle lifted off from the barren surface of GX-427, none of the crew of the Horizon realized that they had just rescued a juvenile member of the species that the Galactic Council had spent centuries trying to exterminate. A species responsible, according to Council records, for the destruction of 3 advanced civilizations, a species that would soon change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The small crystalline creature sat inside a shimmering containment field in the Horizon's science lab. Its blue glow pulsed gently as it moved around the enclosed space, occasionally touching the energy barrier with a tiny tendril before pulling back. Samantha Kelly hadn't left the lab for hours. She sat on a stool, her chin resting on her hands as she watched the creature with fascination. On a nearby screen, readings from various sensors tracked the entity's energy outputs, temperature, and molecular structure. "Have you named it yet?" Captain Olivia Wright asked as she entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Samantha. "Spark," Samantha replied with a tired smile, "because of those little flickers of light that run across its surface." Olivia nodded and studied the creature. "Any idea what it is?" "Nothing that matches our databases," Samantha sighed. "Its body seems to be composed of a crystalline material similar to what we saw in the cave, but it can reshape its molecular structure at will. It's also giving off a type of energy our sensors can barely detect." The creature, Spark, moved to the edge of the containment field closest to them. It stretched upward, forming what looked almost like a small tower, with pulses of light racing up and down its surface. "It's been doing that whenever someone new comes in," Samantha explained. "I think it's curious about us." "Just make sure it stays in that containment field," Olivia reminded her. "We need to follow quarantine protocols until we know exactly what we're dealing with." After the captain left, Samantha continued her observations for another 2 hours before finally heading to her quarters for some much-needed rest. The ship's night cycle was well underway when alarms jolted Greg Turner. Awake, as the Horizon's lead engineer, he was used to middle-of-the-night emergencies. He quickly pulled on his uniform and rushed to the engineering bay where the alarm was sounding. "Computer, what's the nature of the emergency?" Greg called out as he entered the dimly lit room. "Unknown energy signature detected in proximity to the main power core," the ship's computer replied in its calm voice. Greg grabbed a handheld scanner and moved cautiously toward the power core that drove the Horizon's engines. The massive cylinder hummed with energy, bathed in a soft blue glow. He almost missed the small form nestled close to the core's outer casing. "What the—" Greg froze, his scanner forgotten in his hand. The crystalline creature from the planet, the one that was supposed to be safely contained in the science lab, was pressed against the power core. Its body had changed shape to form a thin, flat disk that conformed perfectly to the curved surface of the core. Pulses of light flowed between the core and the creature in a steady rhythm. Greg tapped his communication badge. "Turner to security. The alien specimen has escaped. It's in engineering near the power core." He expected the creature to flee when it noticed him, but instead it reformed itself into something more compact and moved toward him. Greg backed away slowly, not wanting to provoke it. "Stay back," he warned, though he wasn't sure if the creature could understand him. To his surprise, Spark stopped. Then it changed color, the blue glow shifting to match the red of Greg's engineering uniform. When Greg took another step back, the creature mimicked his movement perfectly. "You're copying me?" Greg whispered. The creature pulsed once, brightly, as if in response. When security arrived minutes later, they found Greg sitting on the floor of the engineering bay with the crystalline entity hovering nearby, still matching the red of his uniform. "Don't worry," Greg told the security officers. "It's not doing any harm. I think it was just curious about the power core." Captain Olivia called an emergency meeting in the ship's conference room. Samantha, Paul, Alan, and Greg sat around the table while a portable containment field held Spark in the center. "How did it get out?" Olivia demanded. Alan looked embarrassed. "The containment field was functioning perfectly according to all readings, but when I reviewed the security footage, it appears the creature simply changed its structure to slip between the energy bands of the field." "That should be impossible," Paul said, his face tight with concern. "Apparently not for Spark," Samantha replied. She turned to Greg. "What was it doing with the power core?" Greg shrugged. "It seemed to be studying it, maybe even feeding on some of the energy. But the core's output remained stable, so if it was taking energy, it was only a tiny amount." "The real question," Dr. Karen Bishop said as she entered the room, "is what happened between you and the creature, Greg." The ship's medical officer placed a data tablet on the table. "These are neural scans of both Greg and the creature during their interaction. Look at this pattern matching." The screen showed two waveforms that pulsed in near-perfect synchronization. "It was copying my brainwaves?" Greg asked, looking disturbed. "Not exactly," Karen replied. "It's more like harmony, two instruments playing the same song together. I've never seen anything like it." Samantha leaned forward excitedly. "This suggests it forms symbiotic bonds rather than simply consuming resources. The records we have of similar crystalline entities describe them as parasitic, but this behavior indicates something much more complex." Just then, the ship's communication system activated. "Captain, we're receiving an encrypted transmission from a Galactic Council vessel," the communications officer reported. "They're requesting to speak with you immediately." The mood in the conference room darkened when the message played. The stern face of a being with pale blue skin and no hair filled the screen. The alien wore an ornate uniform covered with symbols of office. I am Representative Zix-9 of the Galactic Council, the being said in a clipped formal tone. Our scans indicate you have retrieved an Omega-level threat entity from planet GX-427. You are ordered to maintain quarantine procedures and prepare for immediate transfer of the entity to our vessel for containment and destruction. Failure to comply will result in severe diplomatic consequences for Earth. End transmission. Silence filled the room after the message ended. Destruction? Samantha finally whispered, looking at Spark. The creature had dimmed considerably during the message, its normally bright blue glow now a subdued, almost gray color. It doesn't seem dangerous, Greg said, watching as Spark slowly reshaped itself into a small, compact form. Olivia's face was grim. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before I hand over anything to the Council. Alan, access everything we have on Omega-level threats. Paul, prepare a security team, just in case. And Samantha, keep studying our guest. As the meeting broke up, Greg noticed Spark begin to glow a bit brighter. The creature extended a small tendril toward him before security took it back to a reinforced containment area. That night, while most of the crew slept, Spark escaped again. This time, the security camera showed it making its way through the ship's corridors until it reached Greg's quarters. When Greg awoke the next morning, he found the crystalline being curled up at the foot of his bed, its surface gently pulsing, in time with his heartbeat. Instead of calling security, Greg quietly spoke to the creature. You're going to get us both in trouble, you know. Spark brightened and formed a small tendril that reached toward him. After a moment's hesitation, Greg allowed it to touch his hand. A warm sensation spread up his arm, and for just a second, he felt a connection, like finding a missing piece of himself he hadn't known was gone. What Greg didn't know was that this simple moment of trust had just changed the future of two species forever. Captain Olivia paced the length of her office, stopping occasionally to look at the holographic display showing the Galactic Council ship. The massive vessel had appeared at the edge of the system 6 hours ago and was slowly approaching the horizon's position. We need more time, she muttered to herself. The door chimed and Alan entered carrying a datapad. His usually neat appearance was rumpled, suggesting he had been working through the night. Captain, I've found the council records on the crystalline metamorphs, he said, his voice tight with excitement and worry. You need to see this. He placed the pad on her desk. The screen showed images of crystalline entities similar to Spark, but much larger and with more complex structures. Olivia scrolled through the files, her expression growing darker. According to these records, crystalline metamorphs were responsible for the destruction of 3 advanced civilizations in the last 1,000 years, Alan explained. The Viridian Empire, the Cos Hegemony, and most recently, a species called the Narians. How? Olivia asked, looking up from the pad. The records claim they consume energy at an exponential rate. They start small, bonding with technology, but eventually drain entire power grids, weapon systems, even the energy fields that protected cities. Alan took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. In the case of the Narians, a single metamorph supposedly consumed the energy from their planetary defense system, leaving them vulnerable to a solar flare that killed billions. Olivia's communicator beeped. Captain, you better come to engineering, Greg's voice said. There's something you need to see. 10 minutes later, Olivia stood in engineering with Greg and Dr. Karen. Spark floated beside Greg, a small tendril of its crystalline body resting on his shoulder. Over the past day, the creature had refused to leave Greg's side, following him everywhere around the ship. Watch this, Greg said. He pointed to a damaged circuit board removed from one of the ship's systems. Spark, can you fix it? The crystalline entity floated down to the workbench. It extended several tendrils that touched different parts of the circuit board. Pulses of light flowed from Spark into the damaged components. Before their eyes, the burnt connections began to repair themselves, metal flowing like water to reconnect the broken pathways. It can manipulate matter at a quantum level, Karen explained, checking readings on her scanner, but only when connected to Greg emotionally. When they're separated, Spark loses much of this ability. It fixed 3 damaged systems this morning, Greg added with a hint of pride. Better than new. Olivia frowned thoughtfully. This doesn't match the Council's description of a mindless energy consumer. Because it isn't one, Samantha said as she entered engineering, her face flushed with excitement. I've completed my detailed scans of Spark, Captain. It's a juvenile. A what? Olivia asked. A child, Samantha explained. Its neural structure is still developing. Adult metamorphs might consume energy indiscriminately, but Spark is different. It's forming connections, learning, developing bonds that guide its behavior. Like a child learning right from wrong, Greg said softly, looking at Spark with new understanding. The ship's communication system activated. Captain, Lieutenant Porter requests your presence in communications. He says it's urgent. In the communications center, Ryan Porter, a young officer with a talent for code breaking, had dark circles under his eyes from hours of work. I managed to access the classified sections of the Council records, he said without preamble. The truth about the metamorphs is very different from what they told us. He pulled up images on the main screen. They showed metamorphs being held in containment fields, subjected to experiments with various devices attached to their crystalline bodies. The metamorphs didn't attack unprovoked, Ryan explained. Each of the destroyed civilizations had captured adult metamorphs and tried to weaponize them. The Viridians used them to power planet-killing weapons. The Kos tried to use them as living power sources for their war machines. And the Narians? Olivia asked. Ryan's face hardened. They found a way to split a metamorph's consciousness, creating copies they could control. The process essentially tortured the being until it lashed out. So the metamorphs were defending themselves, Karen said quietly, and the Galactic Council has been hunting them to extinction ever since, Ryan finished. Their policy is immediate destruction of any metamorph found, no exceptions. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only when Spark floated over to the screen showing the images of its tortured kind. The creature dimmed noticeably, its usual bright blue fading to a dull gray. Greg moved to comfort it, placing a hand near the creature. Spark immediately extended a tendril to touch him, and its color slowly returned. Captain, the communications officer called out. The Council ship is hailing us. Admiral Vrex is demanding to speak with you. Olivia squared her shoulders. Put him through. The main screen changed to show a stern-faced alien with gray, leathery skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Admiral Vrex wore an elaborate uniform festooned with medals and insignia of rank. Captain Wright, the alien said in a cold voice. You have not responded to our previous communication. The Omega-level threat entity must be surrendered immediately. Prepare for our boarding party or face consequences. Olivia stepped forward. Admiral Vrex, we've been reviewing the Council's records on the crystalline metamorphs. There seem to be some inconsistencies in the historical account. All 4 of the Admiral's eyes narrowed. The historical record is not open for debate, human. The entity is a threat to all life in this sector. The entity has a name, Greg said suddenly, stepping into view with Spark beside him. And Spark has shown no hostile intention since we rescued it. The Admiral's eyes widened at the sight of Greg standing unprotected next to the metamorph. You dare to bond with it? You have no idea what you're dealing with? Actually, I think we do, Olivia replied calmly. We know the metamorphs were victims, not aggressors. We know they only attacked when they were exploited and abused. Dangerous. Misinformation, the Admiral snarled. This discussion is over. Surrender the entity, or we will be forced to take action against your vessel. Before you do that, Olivia said quickly, you should know that our entire conversation, along with the evidence we've uncovered, has been transmitted to Earth's ambassadorial team on the Galactic Council. The Admiral's face twisted with rage, but before he could respond, something unexpected happened. Spark floated forward directly in front of the screen. Its body began to shift and change, growing more complex. Suddenly, a beam of light projected from its surface, creating a 3-dimensional image that filled the center of the communications room. The image showed metamorphs in their natural state, living peacefully on a crystalline world. It showed them encountering the first spacefaring races, forming bonds that benefited both species. Then it showed the betrayal, the capture, the experiments, the pain, and finally the desperate defense that had been labeled as unprovoked attack. The most stunning revelation came last, an image of a metamorph and another sentient being sharing a deep bond, creating between them a small new metamorph. They need trust bonds with other sentient species to reproduce, Samantha whispered in awe. That's why they're nearly extinct. After centuries of being hunted, they had no one left to trust. Admiral Vrex had gone silent, staring at the images with all four eyes wide. Olivia stepped forward again. Admiral, we request a formal hearing before the full Galactic Council. Earth claims protection rights for the metamorph species under the Endangered Sentient Entities Act. Until then, we will maintain custody of Spark. For a long moment, the Admiral said nothing. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure. A hearing will be arranged, but be warned, Captain Wright. If that creature causes any harm, your world will bear the responsibility. The screen went dark, leaving the humans standing in shocked silence with Spark glowing brightly in their midst. The small crystalline being had just changed everything. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink colors. Emma walked slowly along the old dirt road, her backpack feeling heavier with each step. She had been traveling for days, and her feet were tired. The small map she carried was worn and folded many times, with marks and notes showing her long journey. Something felt different about this part of her trip. The trees looked older, and the air seemed quieter. Emma could hear only the sound of her own footsteps and the soft wind moving through the branches. She stopped for a moment and looked around, trying to understand where she was. In her backpack, she carried a small notebook that belonged to her grandfather. It was old and had yellow pages, but she kept it safe. The notebook had strange drawings and writing that she could not fully understand. Emma believed it might hold some kind of secret, but she was not sure what that secret could be. As the light began to fade, she noticed a small path leading away from the main road. It was narrow and covered with grass and small plants. Most people would have ignored it, but Emma felt something pulling her toward that path. She hesitated for a few minutes, looking back at the main road and then at the hidden path. Her grandfather had always told her to trust her feelings. Sometimes, he would say, the most important things are found where no one else looks. Those words came back to her now, and she made her decision. With a deep breath, she stepped onto the narrow path. The path was not easy to walk on. Roots from old trees crossed the ground, and small stones made walking tricky. Emma moved carefully, watching each step. Her backpack made soft sounds as she walked, with things inside moving around. After walking for about 30 minutes, she saw something strange. Between two large trees, there was a small stone building. It was not very big, and it looked very old. Moss grew on its walls, and small plants were growing between the stones. The building seemed to be waiting for her, quiet and still. Emma came closer. The building had a small wooden door that looked very old. It was not locked, but it seemed like no one had opened it for many years. She touched the door, and it made a soft creaking sound. Her heart was beating fast. She knew something important might be waiting inside. With slow and careful movements, she pushed the door. It opened with a loud sound that broke the silence of the forest. Dust flew up, and she could see small pieces of light coming through holes in the walls. The inside of the building was simple. There was a small table and a chair made of wood. On the table, something was waiting. It was another notebook, much like the one her grandfather had given her. This one looked even older. Emma picked it up with shaking hands. She could see writing on the first page, but the words were not clear. They seemed to be written in a language she did not know. Outside, the forest was becoming dark. Animals started to make sounds. An owl called from far away, and small animals moved in the grass. Emma sat on the old chair and opened the notebook. She knew this was an important moment. Something was about to change in her journey. The notebook felt heavy in her hands. Its pages were brown and soft. Some pages were torn, and some had water marks. But the writing was still there, waiting to be read. Emma took a deep breath and started to look at the first page. She did not know it yet, but this small stone building and the notebook would change everything. Her journey was about to take a turn that she could never have expected. The forest around her seemed to be waiting, holding its breath, ready for what would happen next. Emma looked up from the notebook and looked around the small room. The light was getting less and less. Soon, she would need to make a choice. Stay in this old building or try to find her way back to the main road in the dark. But right now, all she could think about was the notebook and the secrets it might hold. The night was cold, and Emma wrapped her small blanket around her shoulders. She was still sitting in the old stone building, the mysterious notebook open in front of her. A small flashlight gave just enough light to see the pages. The sounds of the forest came through the small holes in the walls, crickets singing and wind moving through tree branches. Emma tried to make sense of the writing in the notebook. The words were strange and looked like they were written by someone in a hurry. Some letters were big, some were small. Some pages had drawings mixed with the words. She saw pictures of trees, strange symbols, and what looked like maps with no names. Her grandfather's words came back to her again. He always said that some stories are not just told with words. Some stories are told through small signs and hidden messages. Emma remembered how he would spend hours looking at old books, turning pages slowly and smiling to himself as if he knew something others did not. She pulled out her grandfather's notebook from her backpack and put it next to the new notebook. They looked different but seemed connected somehow. The paper colors were similar, and both notebooks had that old smell of paper that had been kept secret for a long time. Outside, the moon began to rise. Its light came through the small holes in the stone building's walls. Emma could see the trees standing like dark shadows. She knew she could not stay here forever. She would need to find food and water soon. But right now, something was more important than food or rest. The notebook had a strange drawing on one page. It looked like a map, but not like any map Emma had seen before. There were no city names or country lines. Instead, there were strange marks that looked like symbols. Some looked like trees, some like mountains, and some like weird shapes she could not understand. One symbol caught her eye. It was near the bottom of the page and looked like a small key. Next to the key symbol, there was a set of numbers: 47, 3428, 121, 97890. Emma recognized these as coordinates, numbers that told exactly where something was on the Earth. But what was at these coordinates? She took out her phone and checked the battery. It was low, but she had just enough power to look up the numbers. The coordinates were in a forest area in Washington State. It was not very far from where she was traveling. Was this a coincidence? Emma did not believe in coincidences. Her grandfather had always told her that every journey has a purpose. We do not choose our paths, he would say. Sometimes the paths choose us. These words played in her mind as she looked at the notebook and the coordinates. The stone building felt different now. It no longer seemed like an old, forgotten place. It felt like a meeting point, a place where something important was about to begin. Emma could feel her heart beating faster. She knew she was close to something big. She looked at her backpack. Inside, along with her grandfather's notebook and some clothes, she had a small compass and a few basic tools. She had packed these things without knowing why. Now it seemed like everything was making sense. The night was getting colder. Emma knew she needed to make a plan. She could not stay in this stone building forever. She would need to follow the coordinates, find out what the key symbol meant, and understand the connection between her grandfather's notebook and this new one. As she thought about her next move, she heard a sound outside. It was not like the normal forest sounds. It was different. A soft step, something moving carefully. Emma stopped breathing and listened. Something was outside the stone building. Something was watching her. She turned off her flashlight and waited. The moonlight was enough to see a little bit. Her hand moved slowly to her backpack where she had a small flashlight and a small knife. She was not afraid. Her grandfather had taught her to be careful but brave. The sound came again, closer this time. It was not an animal. It was something else. Something that knew she was here. Something that was looking for her. Emma took a deep breath. Her journey was about to change again. The notebook, the coordinates, the mysterious sound outside, everything was coming together. She did not know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She would find the truth. The night continued. The forest was quiet, but something was about to happen, something that would change everything.